Good afternoon, everyone. This is EB, the original master here, and I'm very excited. So before I get started with this review, I'd like to give a shout out to Squidward with Hair. Thank you so much for giving me the link for this episode. No, not the link. Thank you so much for putting this episode on Google Drive, because I've been waiting to want to see this episode. So today I'll be reviewing The Getaway from SpongeBob SquarePants from Season 10 that aired today at 10 o'clock. And as you guys noticed that I haven't seen this episode when it aired at 10 because I was out doing stuff. And now I've came home and then Squidward's Hair provided the Google Drive link that he uploaded. And so I saw the episode today. And this is by far hands down, for right now, is my favorite episode from season 10. This episode was so hilarious. I enjoyed every last bit of this episode. It was really great. And like always, in fact, I will put the link of the Google Drive in the description below. So thank you for Squidward with Hair for providing this link, because I've been wanting to see this episode and I finally have it. So the beginning of the getaway is Mrs. Puff taking SpongeBob out to a cemetery. So he's practicing his driving in the cemetery. And just like any other driving school episode, SpongeBob constantly keeps doing bad driving because he does not take it seriously whatsoever. So they drive to a cemetery, and then they ended up, so the reason why they drove to the cemetery is because that Mrs. Puff wants them not to kill anybody in the cemetery, because since they were dead in the cemetery, because there's dead people there in the cemetery. And so Small did bad driving, and then where Small ended up driving in a jail. So then we have this new character for this episode named Sticky Fins. He's actually one of the prisoners in the jail, where Mrs. Puff was going to call someone for a new driving instructor. And what's weird about this episode is that we are in 2017, and Nickelodeon decided to design a phone booth. Nickelodeon, why are you doing these retro things? We're in 2017. Why is there a phone booth still in Bikini Bottom? I mean, I honestly don't know. But yes, this phone booth was randomly there. So that's when Sticky Fins escaped from prison, lands in SpongeBob's boatmobile, and SpongeBob thinks that the prisoner, or Sticky Fins, he thinks Sticky Fins is his new driving instructor, so he drives off with Sticky Fins in the passenger seat of his car. So Mrs. Puff warns SpongeBob that that's not his new driving instructor. So this entire episode was SpongeBob being taught by a criminal. This entire episode was taking place at night, obviously. So this whole episode was taking place at night. There was no daytime, no evening. I'm not going to say obviously, because people probably haven't seen this episode yet. They probably forgot about it. So that's why I'm not going to say obviously in those type of words, because I'm going to try to make the review as entertaining as possible. So then SpongeBob and Sticky Fins are out doing these bad driving. And then Dorsal Dan, he's actually one of the other criminals who supports with Sticky Fins. Dorsal Dan and Mrs. Puff are out driving together, and they actually have a nice relationship with each other. So Dorsal Dan and Mrs. Puff are having a really good relationship with each other, which I found pretty interesting. Then we got all these very bad scenarios of SpongeBob badly driving. He's crashing into buildings, driving on top of buildings, while Mrs. Puff and Dorsal Dan are trying to stop Sticky Fins and SpongeBob from getting into reckless driving. So while SpongeBob is driving recklessly, they're crashing through these buildings and whatnot. It's very bad driving from SpongeBob. And then let's move on to the highlights of these episodes. So the highlights are they drove to a jewelry store. SpongeBob was doing his mimicking madness thing that he did from Mimic Madness. He was changing his body shapes into these different characters. Squidward actually appeared as a cameo. What I mean by that, Squidward wasn't in the episode, but SpongeBob actually changed his form into Squidward. That's what I meant by a cameo of Squidward, because SpongeBob is actually trying to mimic Squidward, I guess, by changing into his body. So while SpongeBob is distracting the jewelry store guy, or the guy running the jewelry store, we got Sticky Fins stealing all the jewelry, going inside the car, driving off. Then you go to the electronics store, where Sticky Fins steals all of these electronic devices, which I find funny because that all these objects in Bikini Bottom are actually shaped like the objects that you get at an electronics store. So the store is built like a radio, which I found pretty hilarious. Then there's like this one hilarious scene when SpongeBob and Sticky Fins were escaping from these two cars that were chasing them. The cars drew off course, and he saw these explosion clouds in the distance. So the cars blew up while SpongeBob was turning, trying to avoid them. And then they actually went past a washing machine, a giant washing machine, which was the boat wash, which I found pretty hilarious. Then there's like this cool scene where they crashed through a coral field sign, and then the corals that hit it, Sticky Fins, actually spelled out the writer of this episode, Kaz, K-A-Z. So that's the writer of The Getaway, and they actually did an Easter egg by actually spelling out his name. Squirrel with Hair also provided the clip from that episode into his channel, which I found pretty interesting, because we never got an Easter egg like that when they spelled out the writer's name. So Kaz is the writer of this episode, and he actually got a little Easter egg. And then, so here's the part that actually made me really cringe a little bit, is when SpongeBob thought a driving range meant a range where you could drive. SpongeBob, a driving range means that's golf. That's golf, meaning a driver's golfing club. So SpongeBob thought that the driving range was actually like a driving area, but it turned out to be that there was golfers hitting these golf balls, and then they kept hitting Sticky Fins. So this was a Sticky Fins torture episode, because thanks to SpongeBob's careless driving, he keeps injuring Sticky Fins. And then that's when SpongeBob started looking at his road signs. He sees a stop sign, a no turn left, and beware of falling rocks. Again, the rocks fell on Sticky Fins until a giant boulder crushes his face. Sticky Fins had enough of SpongeBob's careless driving, so he wants to go back to prison. So when Mrs. Puff and Dorsal Dan meets up with SpongeBob and Sticky Fins, Mrs. Puff tells SpongeBob that that's not his new driving instructor, and it tells him to keep his eye on the road. So SpongeBob's eyeballs popped out of his sockets, and so while they were driving, SpongeBob made a right turn. Mrs. Puff and Dorsal Dan crashed through these barriers, causing the police to chase after them. They arrive back at the police station. Dorsal Dan and Mrs. Puff arrived there too, where Sticky Fins is glad to be back in prison because he never wanted to be left out again. He never wanted to leave prison again after this wild adventure that he had with SpongeBob being a terrible driver. And they actually caught Dorsal Dan, put him under arrest, and then SpongeBob and Mrs. Puff meets each other at the jail. The ending shows these police cars falling, giving us a life lesson. Always wear your seatbelt when driving. And yeah, so that was The Getaway. Boy, was this episode fun. I actually enjoyed this episode a lot, you guys. This episode gets a 9 out of 10. That's my rating for The Getaway. I love the story. I love the humor. I liked the great details added to this episode. SpongeBob's stupidity with driving is the exact same, which I find really annoying. But I actually enjoyed this episode way more than Burst Your Bubble. In fact, this episode is 10 times better than Burst Your Bubble because it actually had SpongeBob actually thinking that a criminal, he actually thought that the prisoner was actually his driving instructor, because when they drove into a jail and Mr. Puff was trying to call in a new instructor for him. So, hope you guys enjoyed my review for The Getaway. I enjoyed this episode a lot. Oh, by the way, Lost and Found, I haven't seen that yet, so when the episode comes out on Kids Cartoons, or watch online, cartoonsonline.com, that's what I meant to say. When the episode comes out, I will skip over The Getaway, and I will go straight to Lost and Found, because Squidward with Hair said that he was having troubles uploading Lost and Found, so I'm going to kind of respect that, but if he gets that situated and uploads it to his Google Drive, I'll go back and watch Lost and Found. But for now, I'm only reviewing The Getaway. With that said, hope you guys enjoyed this review. I enjoyed this episode, 9 out of 10. And I guess I'll see you guys later. Sayonara.